Hello, very nice to be here. We did this about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We did a half-hour conversation like this, and I asked you if you'd like more of these conversations, and thank you. It was an overwhelming number of people said, give me more information. And the general theme of the give me more information was, I'm trying to understand what's going on in my life. I'm trying to understand how the world is experiencing itself as it's experiencing itself. And did something go wrong, or is there a change here that I'm missing in the process of this disruption on one hand with regard to the external world? Internally, I'm feeling anxious, I'm confused. Many people would say, I'm not certain as to kind of how to move around. Some of the beliefs that I hold don't seem to be holding as truths. So if you could comment on all of that, I would be really interested in knowing what was going on, was the general gist of many of your comments. So what I wanted to do is begin to talk a little bit about truth in a way. What is truth? Whose truth is truth? And how do I know what to believe? And in the nature of kind of titling this webinar, it was titled with regard to channelers. We'll get to channelers in a little bit and what they know and what they don't know. But really there's a tremendous shifting going on. So let's step back a little bit and talk about this shifting from the standpoint of, let's go back to 2012. Now, many of you are Mastering Alchemy students. Many of you have been participating in these classes and lectures for quite some time. But let me just step back to the larger audience here that may or may not have heard me say a number of things that I've said in the past many times. In 2012, there was a shift of consciousness. And that shift of consciousness wasn't something that was necessarily really obvious in the minute. It would be like somebody pushed a button and said go, and everything started into motion with that shift of consciousness. But my simple way of trying to explain that is, it would be as if you were ready to upgrade your computer software operating system or the hard drive, and you basically decided to elevate it to the next level. And mechanically what happens when you do that, you load the software in, the software says, wait a minute, I'm just kind of getting my bearings here. And then there's a point where it says, all right, turn off the computer and turn it back on, reboot your computer. And that rebooting process then initiates the new operating system. And right on the face of the new operating system, you get a new screen on the screen. New messaging on the screen looks different, different colors, different positions of different things. So there's an immediate response, and you go, wow, that's kind of interesting. But the larger shifting of the operating system is very much settling in the background, and to a great extent, some of it is still settling into place. That pushing the button to reboot happened in 2012, and over the 2013, 14 into 15, pretty much everything was beginning to take shape. It was beginning to engage into some place where this shift was going to become more apparent. And that shifting is now very much engaged. You're having the experience of this shifting, and you're beginning to watch it happen in a number of ways. It is a shift of consciousness, and the shift of consciousness is driving everything. And so when you begin to talk about consciousness, that's a really big topic, and so you don't get your hands around it very easily. But as you begin to talk about what's going on in terms of psychology or the mental body, the emotional body, even in the physical body, there are a lot of changes that are taking place. They're all being driven by this shift of consciousness. So consciousness in the context of the long term where this is going is really extraordinary in terms of What will civilization look like? How will people engage with one another? What will be kind of acceptable in terms of engaging with one another? And to a great extent, it's what's defined as a fifth dimensional consciousness and a multi-dimensional consciousness beyond that. But that fifth dimensional consciousness, for real simplicity, is this space where respect, dignity, appreciation, gratitude, those type of qualities, co-creation, but very much respect, discerning about others, being in alignment, allowing others to be who they are, while you allow yourself to be who you are. Words like competition and trust and safety, in a way, don't even exist in that fifth dimensional space, because those aspects of fear don't exist in the fifth dimensional space. The need to be better than, the need to take advantage of, they don't exist in this fifth dimensional space. So on one hand you could say, gee, that sounds like a tremendous utopia. Yeah, very much so. Is it real? It's absolutely real. Is it possible to step into it right now? Possible. And that fact is actually pretty simple, but simple may not be easy. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. But this shift of consciousness is providing extraordinary opportunities, but it is also providing some really extraordinary disconnects. And the question that kind of drove this, besides you wanting to have more information, is many people kept saying, help me to understand this. So let's see if we can begin to take a look at how do you understand this. Because the external realities are beginning to be very disruptive. And one of the things that is happening in this shift of consciousness is there is I'm going to use the word segregation. And it's not really separation, but segregating here makes more sense. You're beginning to see levels of thought, aspects of how people believe, what people are in agreement with, what they're not in agreement with. Many of those levels are starting to segregate. You're beginning to see differences in opinions beginning to have more lines drawn in them. To date, prior to 2012, just using that as a line in the sand, many people had relationships with one another, but they didn't talk about things. You know, it's that old adage that you don't talk about sex, religion at the dinner table, politics at the dinner table, because everybody had a different opinion and it created disruption, so you don't talk about those things. Well, in a way, the whole world was structured, or at least many of the kind of the first world, whatever that really means, the people in the United States, Europe, educated people who are playing kind of in this realm that weren't in survival at the level of many other places on the planet, they didn't talk about a lot of things. And I liked you and you liked me and we kind of got along. But if you think about it, a lot of the conversations, a lot of the interactions, you have people were really somewhat superficial. You didn't get depthy into conversations with people because you didn't want to disrupt or possibly offend or embarrass yourself. And so you held on to numbers of your beliefs. Many of the beliefs that people hold on to were most likely not going to be accepted if you just opened your mouth and said it out loud. Numbers of others would not accept what you had to say. But the interesting part of this shift is you can't take your baggage with you on this journey. So what you're watching right now is everything that you hold on to, that you don't talk about, that is off balance in your space. Many of the beliefs you hold are being driven to the surface. And as they're being driven to the surface, it's an interesting experience because you're watching, let's just take some examples, you're watching certain groups of people have really hard lines about other people, falling in the context of racism or sexism, basic beliefs that say mine and theirs, this is true, that's not good, this is bad, very third dimensional duality. The other side of the coin is people that might be considered liberals are somewhat shocked that anybody could hold that set of beliefs on the other side. But if you're just watching this using those two examples, that conservative nature about interaction with people, liberal nature of interaction with people, they're black and white. And you're watching it in the United States, the divide in the United States, the divide in Europe, the divide in many places around the world is all starting to come to the surface. There's a consciousness in how people are beginning to perceive. People are beginning to have groups to associate with. It's like, yeah, I don't like those people, and I have a whole lot of other people who don't like those people. You have that liberal side that basically is aghast that this could possibly be a belief system, and they're finding their groups. So you're starting to get a segmentation of the society. It's beginning to move apart. It's beginning to do that in lots of different categories. And so it's as if the world in this consciousness is beginning to move. Now, something I know about this fifth dimensional consciousness, respect, dignity, appreciation, allowing others to be who they are while you allow yourself to be who you are, out of judgment, simply being able to observe present time, observation, without engagement. That's moving towards a fifth dimensional place. That person who holds a different opinion than you isn't either good or bad. There's many things that you like about that person, but here what's happening is like, I'm astonished. How could you possibly believe that? And then you wind up getting into arguments over the dinner table or among friends or at work. You're beginning to create lines, and in that case you're starting to see separation in the relationship between people, relationships beginning to readjust. A lot of what is happening is those beliefs that I've held on to for a long time, they're simply coming to the surface. And in that process, there's a lot of discomfort that people have, particularly when they look at somebody else and they say, how can you possibly believe that? It's not true. That's not true. So this whole question of truth, whose truth? What is true? What is even worth talking about? Is it really important to hold on to some of those really hard lines that we all hold on to? So if I step back a little bit, as you grow up, one of the things that we all do is we grow up with the mom, dad, teacher, minister. And the mom, dad, teacher, minister love you. And let's give them completely the benefit of the doubt. They love you. And so what they do is they want the best for you. They want you to have the best. But I want you to have the best in my image. This is what I believe. We talk to those people. We don't talk to these people. We go to this school. We don't go to that school. We attend this church. We don't attend that church. We eat these kind of foods. We live in these kind of neighborhoods, etc., etc. And you as a little kid say, okay, me too. If it's good enough for them, if that's what the truth is, as you begin to kind of play in the world a little bit more, sometimes those truths get challenged. But a lot of times they don't get challenged. And when you don't have a worldly interaction, you don't really get to engage to see whether that interaction or that truth, that belief that we hold is really something that I want to continue to hold. So again, you're seeing this alignment of energies that say, this is what I've always known and this is how it is. Other energies that are beginning to move apart, beginning to have the same opinion that they've had in astonishment that somebody could believe that, both sides of the coin. But what is happening is you're starting to find that as this shifting consciousness is occurring, it's beginning to change the landscape. It's changing the pixels on the screen. It's beginning to change the flow at a very subtle level. So people are finding that their status quo is being interrupted. Their expectations are being interrupted. Their beliefs are being interrupted. Their truths are being interrupted. And it's very, very uncomfortable. And as you try to figure out how to deal with it, in a way you're bumping into people you know, and all of a sudden they have a different set of beliefs. And now I'm more isolated because I can't even talk to the people that I used to talk to. So this disruption is very visible in the external worlds. You're seeing it in the geopolitics of the world. It's like astonishing that you could have two heads of state arguing with one another, threatening to shoot off a nuclear missile. It's just preposterous. And yet, as I say that, there is another side of the truth that are sitting there saying, push the button. Who's right? What's correct? How do you determine? And so this whole process that many people are going through is the baggage is all being pushed to the surface. The emotions that I hold, the patterns I hold. So how do we get to this place? In a real way, you have the mom, dad, teacher, minister who say, this is truth, and you go, okay. And then because you hang out in that grouping of people, you see that belief system validated. And so it's like, well, it is truth, so I believe this. And then as you begin to believe it, you start to have habits that support that belief. It's a pretty natural string of things. But this is where it gets a little challenging, because pretty soon the habit becomes an unconscious interaction. I just do this. I just say this. This is my truth. So you begin to have relationships. And this is a whole nother area where many people are saying my relationship is falling apart or being challenged. Well, I love you, I like you, I'm attracted to you for a series of reasons. It may be physical, it may be intellectual, it may be a number of different things. That is what brings us together. But over time, that attraction begins to be something that many times is appreciated for a long time. Sometimes it's just taken for granted. But in relationship, when two people or a business or people association begin to hang out together, all of the little beliefs, thoughts, emotions, considerations, habits begin to come to the surface. This shift of consciousness is driving all of that to the surface. So if there's a place where respect, dignity, appreciation, gratitude, allowing isn't held in somebody's space, it's being pushed to the surface. That process is creating confusion. And the confusion is sometimes amplified by the nature of how this evolution is coming. One of the things in relationship to my comment earlier about channelers, many of you that are listening to this, very spiritual people, following this whole metaphysical, spiritual, religious pursuit of spirit in whatever format you do it, you still have a grouping of people that say this is a truth. One of those places where I'm watching lots of spiritual people beginning to ask more questions, but they're looking for answers from externally, from outside of themselves. And one of the places that spiritual people go to in the metaphysical side is channelers. So something is happening right now that adds to this level of confusion from my observation. As this level of consciousness begins to open up, the positive side, a portion of the positive side, is as a person begins to get quiet, as a person begins to recognize present time, I'm in present time, I'm observing from present time, there is a shift that is occurring. Rather than having to constantly go away from yourself to get your answers, in that quiet present time space, everything comes to you. It's an enormous shift. We'll talk about that in the next session we do in a couple of weeks. But this shift is really very big. In that process, many spiritual folks are beginning to find, because they're asking, I want direction. I want engagement with the spiritual nature of consciousness. That spiritual nature has always been there. Those archangelics, the ascended masters, the lords of light, and many beings that are in a space that don't have a body, that are very happy to provide information when somebody aligns their energy with the energy of one of the beings. And so something that is really fascinating is the number of people now channeling. A tremendous amount of people channeling. But who are they channeling? What are they channeling? Is it a truth? because many of the channelers are thrilled about being able to channel. Rightfully so. It's a very exciting thing, particularly if you can discern, is this information correct? Is this somebody else's information? Is this just a level of throwaway information that's really kind of interesting, but it doesn't apply to me? One of the things that I'm watching in the channeling community is that level of being thrilled with their ability to receive messages and the desire to transmit the message. But who's the source of the information? And so much is being said. One of the things that I'm finding really fascinating is many of the channelers are saying, because of this shift of consciousness and because you're a believer and a spiritual person, you now have this living light body. You're ascending. In fact, you've already ascended. You're just in the process of recognizing it. And on and on and on. In my awareness, which is somebody saying their truth, so take this with a complete grain of salt, because I may be completely in a direction that's not your truth. So, in a way, sitting right here, I am the last person on the planet you want to believe, because I'm giving you some information from pretty much a neutral place, but I can be very persuasive in delivering a message. That's not what's occurring here. I'm really asking you to decide for yourself. But many of these messages, particularly around this ascension and around this light body, are really not accurate from my point of view. You can ascend. Your ascension is simply your evolution as a spiritual being, stepping into this next level of consciousness, awareness, the ability to discern about information, really tap into energetics of some of these astonishingly amazing realms of consciousness. But if you think you have been anointed because some channeler says you've been anointed, I'm going to ask you to take a breath, step back, and reconsider that. You're clearly on the pathway, the opportunity to proceed with your own evolution. That's what this is all about. But some assembly is required. Your ascension is not a free lunch. You just don't get anointed and this takes off and everything's wonderful. One of the pieces of everybody's evolution is you can't take your baggage with you on this journey. And so what is that baggage? Well, the baggage is the mom, dad, teacher, minister's beliefs that I've said, yeah, that's the truth, and I'm still hanging on to. And many of them those beliefs are never even questioned because they drop into habits, and then habits become a way of life, and then you begin to attract others to likes that you hold on to, my beliefs, my habits. I like you because you're like me. And we kind of live in a little bundle and everything's wonderful until it's not. And this is the point where some of it is until it's not. All of these habits, beliefs, thoughts, emotions that we each are engaged with are all coming to the surface. And many of them simply aren't ours. And so we have done something very neat. We have organized ourselves in agreements, in groups, in neighborhoods, in religions, in churches, in intellectual societies, etc., groups, by agreement. I like you because you're like me. But many of those beliefs were never even your beliefs. Never your beliefs. You just accepted them. One of the things that I always find fascinating is if you look into the eyes of a little baby, 2 months old, 3 months old, 6 months old, and you just see that smile, that brilliance that comes back. But come back and look at that little kid when they're 1 year old, and they're living in mom, dad, teacher, minister's beliefs. So as we all grow up, we carry around everybody else's truths. You should this, you shouldn't that. Good, bad, right, wrong. But think about it for yourself. How many times do you find that you get dulled out? You have these patterns, these beliefs. I'm not happy. I'm not doing what I want to do. Well, what is it that you want to do? Well, I don't know. I don't know. I just do what I know. Well, but if what I know is the mom, dad, teacher, minister's beliefs, who are you? And this question of who are you is what this consciousness is pushing on. It's pushing all the who you are not up to the surface. And you're watching the world begin to segregate. And a lot of the pieces are being pushed out. Many who are on a spiritual path are pretty clear about finding the question, who am I? And they are able to discern to a great extent between what others think and who I am. But nonetheless, those beliefs, those habits, those thoughts, the emotions that get drawn to the thought, that reactionary nature of how we engage with the world around us isn't who you are. And so quite a bit of that is really kind of being pushed out. It's a space where you begin to find a couple of choices that you have that allows a little bit smoother navigation of this. And we'll talk more about this next time in terms of choices that you have, tools, and how to kind of really move through this much more comfortably, with much more ease than many are currently having. But this aspect of understanding time, present time. Everybody thinks they know present time, but time is an application. It is not a fixed truth. Time is one of the things that locks this whole third dimensional state of fear and distortion into place. Past, present, future, and then you die. When you start to recognize things are changing and you begin to get into present time, as in like right now where you're just sitting listening theoretically, and you're not into yesterday or tomorrow, lunch or tonight's dinner, whatever it may be, you're right here. In the right here space, you have choice. But in that reactionary third dimension where you're worrying about yesterday and hoping it doesn't happen to you tomorrow, that space between past and future, you spend very little time in present time, third dimension in a way. When you are in present time in that third dimensional space, usually it's a reactionary present time, meaning, oh my God, this wasn't supposed to happen. And what do I do now? Well, you're in present time. But the present time, as you begin to step into this kind of higher fourth, fifth dimension, multidimensional space, this present time is a place where you observe and then choose an action. You don't lean, you're not engaged, you just simply observe and then choose. Understanding present time and understanding some of the fundamentals, again we'll talk about next time, but grounding, center of your head, being able to observe without engaging, being able to kind of align in a different platform of observation than the fear or the frustration, the confusion, the lack of certainty, allows you choices. Now, simple as that sounds, when a person is in motion, worrying about, anticipating, being concerned about all the attention in the future, unhappy about the past, all of that is an off-balance space where virtually everybody is now experiencing the question of confusion or uncertainty. So, what is your truth? Who are you? And really to begin to ask the question, not in a big spiritual manner, not in like, how do I relate to God manner, that too, but here, who am I right here? Can I be right here? Can I take a breath right here? Can I allow myself to be right here? And then from right here, ask the question, all right, what do I do about this? What should I do next? How would I like to experience myself next? That next could be literally the next 2-3 seconds in front of you. It could be the next hour. It could be the next weekend. It could be the job you're about to engage in or the one you're currently in. How do I wish to engage with this differently? Now, last point on this piece is something that's happening in this segregation. It's as if the pieces are beginning to pull apart. And part of the confusion that many seem to be speaking about is I'm running out of time and I'm chasing events. So as these events begin, your energy begins, the nature of the world begins to segregate, pull apart, and you are an external person going to, you're exhausting yourself. I'm running to this, I'm running to that, I'm running out of time with this, I don't think I can make this happen. Pretty much the answer to that is, can you take a breath and get into present time? What is my next choice for managing my life? If that one thought can be understood, the ability to start to rearrange this segregating aspect of consciousness into something where everything begins to be observed as orbiting around you. It's all in your orbit. It's all in your energy field. So learning how to manage yourself quietly, observing in present time, is pretty much the choice of navigating this reality. It's in that place you're going to start to recognize in choice, this is not my truth. This is something I was told when I was 14 years old. I'm now 35. It's no longer true. But have you been living your life based on that truth? Yes, will be the answer more often than not. So how do you begin to stop, get quiet, present time, and sit back not as in having problems, but sit back as in, what would I like to choose? What do I really believe? Now, in present time, you're going to get lots of awarenesses as you begin to see these divisions, these segregations of black and white, truth and non-truth, liberal, conservative, right, wrong, good, bad. All of that is the duality of the third dimension that's being pushed out. So, present time, being able to be right here, quiet, disengaged. Now, it's actually extremely simple, but it's not necessarily easy, because that emotion, that magnetic, electrical sensation in the body that says I'm doing it wrong, or the rational mind simply saying, what do you mean you're going to believe something else or consider something else? Don't you know? That all becomes very challenging. It pushes on you, that magnetic nature of the rational mind. So, but the shifting of this consciousness observed from present time is what is going to allow you to basically see some of the remarkable things that are going on that begin to be stair steps. You just simply step into this space, present time. Step into this space, present time. And in that stepping into different spaces of choice, kind of elevating your awareness in this shifting consciousness, much of who you are not is what's falling away. So the space of present time is what I'm going to suggest to all of you who have been writing emails and asking questions. How do I deal with this anxiety? How do I deal with this off-balances? Most of the off-balances and anxiety is what is leaving. It's all just being pushed out. There's no orderliness to it. There's no pattern to it. It's just simply, it's being pushed out. And as you begin to understand that's happening, you have some really extraordinary tools and skills available to you to choose from. So let me kind of come to a stopping point there. There's a number of questions that people are asking, and let me see if I can answer some of the questions in the context of what I'm talking, and you may have asked other questions. But what I would like to do is make this kind of part one of a two-part piece. And on the 19th of October, what I'd like to really do is talk about what are the tools? How do you begin to find this level of balance. Begin to define your energy field. Begin to create a point where you discern between Shakespeare's theater out there, which is really for your entertainment, and my truth right here. What is your truth? What makes you happy? What drives your passion? When was the last time you saw it or had the experience of it? It's always there, but it's kind of the mom, dad, teacher, minister beliefs that say, no, you have to do it this way. This is the truth. The truth is what you want to make truth. And your truth doesn't have to argue with or push against anybody else's truth. It's this navigating, this stair-stepping into this fifth dimensional place where you can allow people to be where they are. You can see how they are where they are, and you can just allow it from a standpoint where there's no engagement in that part of the conversation. They're in their growth period. They're in their experimenting and experiencing being a spiritual being in a human body, as are you. So I hope I put some pieces on the table for you to consider. This is a shift in consciousness. It's going to accelerate. It's not going away. And the sooner you begin to recognize that many of these changes, earth changes, climate changes, sociological changes, you've got changes right now, as simple as it is on one hand, Catalonia in Spain threatening to leave Spain, forming a new country. If that happens, the European Union begins to be very fragile. The whole nature of the world is in transformation. So you're going to see astonishing events, things that were absolutely true, completely becoming not true. So how do you position yourself to navigate these massive changes that are going to continue and be astonishing, at the same time be able to walk through the seams without losing your space? So let me turn this over to Roxanne and have her kind of ask some of the questions that you've asked, and let me see if I can respond to them in a way that might be very helpful.
Hello, if you heard a click, that was me plugging my microphone into the camera. Jim, here is a question from someone named Claire. I just joined level 1 today. I'm finding more and more that what I thought was my truth is actually my parents' truth. Do you know a trick to remove them?
Yeah, this is exactly what we're talking about, and level 1 is all about level 1, level 2 in mastering alchemy is really very much about do this, what happened. It's not a truth, it's a tool or a skill or an alignment of energy that allows you to begin to perceive slightly differently. But one of the things about the mom, dad, teacher, minister is much of that energy is perceived to be your thought. Thoughts you think in your head. Well, I'm the only one in my head. Well, actually, no, you're not the only one in your head. So think about it. The mom, dad, teacher, minister's truths. As you get into present time, the question is, does this serve me? And as you begin to get into a place of neutrality, a place where you can understand that word as a feeling, discernment, it's visceral, it's in the body, it's not an intellectual concept, discernment, neutrality, balance. These are stable energetic fields. From those places, does this serve me? In level 2, you use a lot of tools that allow you to basically just take it out of your space. This isn't my truth. I can let it go. And you do. It's not therapy. It's not spending a lot of time analyzing, how did this happen to me? It's really, would you like to position yourself in such a way where you can look at that and realize, I can just remove this. And it's removed. So level 2 tools. But we'll talk about that even a little bit more next time.
Jim, this question is from Harvey. It sounds like you're talking about 2 separate worlds or realities.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Now, it gets more both interesting and challenging. There was a time where we were talking about, and still are talking about, the concept of two Earths. When that concept was really brought forth, maybe back in the 90s, people were really looking for the other planet. But right here, it's not so much another planet as it is a segregation in how you perceive the world, how you engage with one another, how you find allowing, how you find balance, laughter, amusement, respect, dignity, gratitude, appreciation. You can have that, or you can have anger, frustration, jealousy, rage. Which one feels better? In fact, though, people say, well, this one feels so much better, but I don't know how to get there. This is all I know. Well, what if you could build a platform and step out of one into the other? That's the transitioning into this fifth dimensional space. So dimensions is something that is a fascinating conversation for another day. But think about it in terms of just you're moving. Here you've been living in a particular environment that has been off-balancing and not supportive, and you begin to recognize that there's this wonderful beach over here, that everybody has a nice time and it's really enjoyable people. Well, how do I get there? And how do I get there isn't that complicated, but some assembly required. The dimension is really an entirely different state of consciousness and a state of different realms of reality as you begin to know yourself. So it's a journey to that space.
Jim, could you say more about co-creation with the teachers of light that you do?
Well, one of the things that happened in terms of how did Mastering Alchemy come about, in my reality, I never didn't know that I was doing something that other people really didn't do, or for the most part, I never turned off what most people turned off as they started to grow up. So in my reality, I always had what people call a guide or a voice that I could talk to, and the voice was really pretty clear. Virtually, it aligned with something that I point to in the heart, this internal guidance system. And I'd say, gee, I think I want to go jump off this cliff and really have a good time. And it would say, yeah, I don't think so. And I would believe it. And I wouldn't. And the consequence was there, but wasn't experienced because I listened. Most people don't listen anymore to that internal guidance system. So as I began to ask more questions, as I began to even wake up a little bit more, the ability to start to realize there are more voices, and the ability at nighttime to realize that you can consciously go into the gardens of these higher realms and play with the beings, play with the elements, play with the animals that don't exist anymore on the planet, but play with these archangelics, lords of light. And then it's as if you sit at the table and you just ask a question, and the question begins to produce another question, and the answer begins to say, well, tell me more about that. And that's pretty much what Mastering Alchemy is. The Mastering Alchemy is basically Metatron saying there's a pathway that has never ever been walked by humanity. And would you like to participate with us in building and expanding that pathway so humanity can follow it? And that's the pathway that Mastering Alchemy is kind of constructed on.
Jim, here's a question from Monica. What happens to those who are not ready to move to the fifth dimension?
Yeah, this is an interesting aspect of it. So this segregating doesn't mean this world drops away and this world flourishes. This is an evolution. This is a progression. And one of the things that, really one of the purposes of just having this conversation and beginning to point you to this awareness of both mom, dad, teacher, minister, and present time, and some of the other pieces, is as you begin to hold your attention in this higher space, you begin to kind of grow. But there's a lot of people who can't do that. And they can't do it not because they don't want to do it. Well, there's a couple levels. There's the aspect of people who want to do it, but don't believe they can do it. They believe it's too much work. There's that whole level of people, and you know a lot of these people that are wannabes. I really want to do this, and I'm going to start it tomorrow. They never start it. There's a level of consciousness that are beings that are spiritual beings, but they're not mature beings. And so in their venue of experience, what you call a lifetime, in everybody's lifetime, there are opportunities to choose the high road, to choose well-being, respect, dignity, appreciation, laughter. They may be poor, they may be in impoverished circumstances, they may be in prison. It doesn't matter where somebody is. It's when you begin to recognize, I just like to laugh. I want to find ease. I can let go of some of these things. They will transition just like the most spiritually aligned person playing the game. But there is so much fear and so much intensity of the belief systems magnetically holding a person into an alignment that they hate in many cases. They just don't like. This is how it is. They're angry, they're resentful, and yet you can lay before them this path and they won't choose it. So many will lose their bodies in the same nature that they always lost their bodies. There are going to be many people who are now consciously stepping out of their bodies, as in dying. That level is increasing all over the planet, just in natural states, let alone wars and things like that. So people are going home. Everybody goes home, but they go home to different levels. Where we're talking in this place is going home fully conscious, basically being able to evolve in the state of that living light body which is being made available, and then coming back in that format if that's a choice. But not everybody will come back. There'll be lots of choices available to you in this process as it unfolds.
Jim, let's make this our last question, and I just would like to remind everybody that on October 19th we're doing another one of these, and so if you have questions, that's another opportunity to ask them. We're also doing a free webinar this month. I don't have the date in front of me, but check on the website, and that's another great place to ask questions.
Yeah, let me just say those free webinars are a piece of information, a working session. Close your eyes, do this. So those are all tools and constructs of energy. As long as we're right here, let me just say too, a lot of you have recently signed up for the Level 1 program. There are going to be 3 live do this working workshops, working classes in Level 1 this month, kind of leading into that Level 2 in November. So those are all available for you to participate in, and they're going to be about structuring this energy journey in a way that I think is very valuable.
Okay, so here's our last question. This is from Ta Foon. I know Level 1 tools work. I did not use them last week and I got cold and weak. Why can't I discipline myself using tools all the time? Do I love pain?
Great question. No, but you have habits. And so what happens is they don't get anchored. And one of the things that happens is there's an adage, you can never solve the problem from the problem. You have to really step out of it to begin to perceive how to work with a problem or a challenge. Same thing here is if you have a set of habits and beliefs that this is who I am, no matter how hard you say, I want to get out of this, in real certainty, if that level of thought and emotion, that magnetic pull that holds that belief and that habit in place in somewhat of a semi-conscious state, isn't eliminated, isn't chosen to step out of in an alignment where there's no residuals, then you kind of always get pulled back into that. The whole structure of Mastering Alchemy, Level 2 particularly, is about how do I neutralize that magnetic pull or that real charge that I have when I get anger, or that place where I always feel stuck. I don't know how to get out of this. Those are all energetic fields. And understanding the energetic field and how to neutralize the energetic field without any of the residual baggage of I'm not a good person, I'm a bad person. That's all a waste of time, that energy of I'm not okay. The thing is, you can't be not okay. It's impossible to be not okay. We try real hard to be not okay. We wear shoes that are 3 sizes too small, and we put on a jacket that says, I'm not okay, nobody likes me, I don't deserve, I'm not attractive, I'll never succeed. We wear those jackets. They were never your jackets. They're never your shoes. So this ability to start to recognize this discomfort I have in my body isn't mine. Having access to tools that you understand and the application, would you like to just neutralize some of that fear and some of that unconscious electromagnetic field of anger, frustration, resentment? So that's what happens as you begin to build these platforms of certain, capable, senior in your body, and then you apply the tools from that place. So we'll talk about those tools and opportunities to transition through this kind of structure of the consciousness and the magnetics of it and the disruption in this next kind of live talk on the 19th of October. So I hope this was helpful. If you have questions, masteringalchemy.com, we try to answer all the questions. And you might look at how that level 1 and level 2 program work. It might give you some of these answers until we meet again. So thank you. Enjoy. Blessings.